I would like to invite Daniela De Cotis to our virtual stage. Daniela is a human resource leader with more than 20 years experience in leading teams and helping leaders develop and implement strategies to attract, retain, and develop talent. Daniela is currently the Vice President, Human Resources, Business Banking for TD Bank Group, following 8 years leading HR teams in digital, innovation, data, and technology domains. Very active in the technology ecosystem, she is focused on supporting initiatives that mentor and encourage young women in STEAM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, and now including arts and design. Daniela is a mentor in our Advancing Women program, so another initiative here on campus, and we're very grateful for her support across all of these opportunities. Welcome, Daniela. It's great to be talking to you.
Thank you. Can you hear me all right?
Well, it's wonderful to be with you here this morning. Well, we're going to jump right into it because we don't have that much time for people to hear about all of your experience. And I really I want to give you an opportunity to share your insights. So why don't I start with a broad question?
Sure.
Why don't I ask you to briefly tell us about your career path from York onward, and how you ended up where you are today?
Great. Thank you so much. And thanks again for hosting this, and thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. It was great to meet some of you actually in person last week at another event, and great to be here. Hi, everyone. So I actually, in my first year when I entered York, going back several years, I started as a part-time teller actually at TD Bank. I thought I actually walked into a branch, had such a great positive customer experience, and just said, these are people I want to work with. And I applied. And I actually spent 5 years working part-time in branch banking while I was in university. I was studying political science and communications, and was at the time thought I'm going to enter a career in public relations. That's what I was interested in. But what I did do is also keep up on some of my financial accreditations. And so while at York, I also ensured that through the Ontario Securities Commission, was doing courses through them and keeping up on financial accreditations. And so when I graduated, was offered a full-time job when I was working for Canada Trust. Canada Trust and TD was about to announce a merger, and they said, we can't have students. I was going to do a co-op with them, and they said, well, we can't have students because there was this material announcement they were about to make. So I couldn't join their public relations group, but I thought they offered me a full-time branch manager job, and I took that. So when the opportunity presented itself, I was open to the idea, and did that even though it wasn't what I had necessarily planned. Spent a couple of years in our branch network, and then I was in the city, actually just working near York University, and then moved to downtown Toronto and started leading our small business banking group at TD, and our private banking group. So again, a customer-facing sort of group leading a sales team. Then I moved into HR, actually. And what brought me into HR was because I had been leading a sales team, I had quite a large people management experience. They asked me to lead strategy for performance management, which was one of the HR domains within corporate HR. Did that for a while. That then transitioned to a talent management technology job. At the time, if I go back, I couldn't believe this, but when I started this job, we were still writing performance reviews on paper and email. And so with the prevalence of technology that was starting at the time, we were looking for learning management system and talent management system technology. Did that, and did a chief of staff job, which is more HR strategy job. And then from there thought, it's time to sort of venture out and broaden my HR domain expertise into a generalist area. And so then started my generalist career, which then led for the next 10 years in various sort of progressions, but various areas supporting capital markets, and then spent most of my time in sort of the digital innovation technology, machine learning space. Did that for quite a while. And then most recently now lead the HR team that provides support to our Canadian business bank. So I didn't really actually plan it, to be honest with you. I think a lot of it was just decisions that I made along the way as I was open to the opportunities, but still kept myself up, whether it was in the financial designations or even through York University. There was a number of courses, both through Osgoode Law. Schulich had a master's certificate for HR leaders. And so I just continued sort of continuing education throughout that, and executive education, actually all of it through York University.
Yeah, that's one, like some wonderful messages in there. And I'm sure there are even some students working as bank tellers on this call, right? And messages and seeing the opportunity where you are, as opposed to this thinking that there's this place that you need to move on to after graduation. That there are opportunities right in front of us sometimes. And then I love this taking advantage of what the challenges that are presented to you.
Yeah, I mean, there's critical experiences in everything that we do, right? And I think,
Yeah.
sometimes it's important to be planful at the same time being open to the opportunities. And to be truthful, I would say many of the jobs that I did, particularly when I talked about that kind of middle part of my career around the chief of staff job, the technology job, there was even the performance management job. These were jobs that didn't exist before I took them. I was the first incumbent. And so again, being open to, sometimes you can't always plan because the opportunities present
Right.
themselves, and as things evolve.
Yeah. And you don't even know what's going to be available. It
Right.
hasn't happened yet. Yeah.
Hasn't
Wonderful.
happened.
Okay. Yeah. Great. Thank you for sharing that with us. Maybe another broad question that kind of asks you to reflect on HR as a profession. So as a field, what do you think are some key trends, some things that are going to be important to people who are coming into HR at this moment?
Yeah, I mean, it's changed a lot. It's changed a lot for sure. I know for all of the mentors, I'm sure you'd agree. I've seen a lot of change over the last 16 years for sure. I think generally leaders have always known, for some time that human resources has been at the forefront of successful organizations. I think we're seeing more and more that chief people officers or CHROs are reporting directly to CEOs or CEOs minus one, right at the top of the house, as being just as critical, or if not more, a critical function as things like finance and risk or regulatory. Um, I would say that as we're seeing the market evolve right now, and most industries are surviving by just being adaptable to change, building the capabilities for the future, and then reskilling and building leaders who can also lead others through the change. And this is all within the HR domain, and so I think that's becoming increasingly important. As a result, I think organizations and businesses are realizing the important role that HR plays. I think in terms of trends, there's a few kind of key focuses that I'm seeing in the labor market that have been influencing the work that we're doing. And in talking to as many peer networks, I think most of my peers across, particularly in financial services, but I would say across all industry, are seeing a lot sort of influence in the work of HR. I would say there's sort of a few things. One, I would say hybrid and remote work and the impact that is having to culture. I think the return to office and return to work. I think most people, I think, thought that was going to be a short-term change or evolution post-COVID coming out of the pandemic. I think it's actually going to be a longer-term conversation. I think organizations are still trying to figure out what that looks like, what it means, and the long-term impact to culture and the way that we structure work. And the way that we structure projects, the technology needed, but also what's important, and how important are face-to-face interactions and so forth, and the impact that actually is having on our cities as well. Secondly, I would say leading change and transformation, particularly focus on the way that we do work. And so, we're being asked to create lots of points of views and plans around the impact of technology, of AI automation on the workforce, both in terms of, I think, the skills we will require in the workforce, and how does HR get ahead of that in terms of creating the capabilities, the skills, what we recruit for, but also the impact that automation is going to have to the elimination of some jobs. But, I think those jobs aren't necessarily eliminated fully. I think they will be different. And so the work that will be required and the skills will be required will be different. And you can't wait for it to happen in order to then upskill, right? We need to be really thoughtful about how we begin that upskilling and transition of skill in the workforce, and try to be really proactive and think ahead of that. I think more and more pressure on HR will be as a result of that. I would say too, we're seeing a lot of market pressures, particularly now, but we know this is cyclical. We've got an economic cycle, and as a result of that, you see market pressures around efficiencies and expenses. And the thing is, you would say, I think most people don't realize, or I think traditionally we didn't look to HR to help us solve our efficiency and budget issues. I'm seeing more and more, both in my organization, but also right across with my peer set, more and more HR is at the table having those conversations, because the largest expense in most organizations is people. It's people, it's the enablement of people, it's the technology that enables people. It's the premises that enable people. Those are the expenses. And so HR, I think more and more is at the forefront of helping us respond to some of the market pressures. And then lastly, I would just say a skills shortage. I think there is a persistent skills shortage, not only in some of the new areas, but in just existing niche areas. And how do we help acquire and develop that talent as well, while still focusing on creating an inclusive and diverse workforce. I think those are all trends that we're seeing, some new and some ongoing.
Yeah, ongoing. Yeah, the way you framed them, they all seem fairly positive for HR, like increased responsibility, increased thoughtfulness, and increased requirement of a deep connection to the purpose of business, or the business of business, right? Like that's great.
Yeah.
Thank you. I want to get some messaging from you directly to our students, and I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about first your own experiences of how networking and mentoring have helped you as a way to help our students understand how connections that they're making this evening might be beneficial to them.
Yeah, I think, thank you for it's a great question. And I think continuing even these topics on mentoring and networking are so important. So, one, I would say to the students, thank the event organizers. Like, there is nothing more important than having these conversations and allowing, both virtually and in person, having these networking opportunities. I think for me, it played a really big role. I'll share, I was not, my role kind of requires me to have gleaned in a little bit more, developing more of an extroverted personality, but I never was. Mm-hmm. And so I think that can be overwhelming a lot of times if you think about networking. And I think sometimes we think about networking as getting into like a big room and having, prepared kind of speech, and that could be very helpful, of course. But if that doesn't work for you, I think that's okay too. There are different ways to meet people and to network and expand your connections, even if it's not a natural comfort zone for you. You get more comfortable, though, the more and more you practice. So you want to keep it up for sure. I would say, and I know you've all heard, I'm sure, lots about networking. So maybe I'll bring up something a little bit different that I think a lot of times we just don't talk enough about. But the benefit of networking with people at levels of all stages of their career, as well as peer mentoring. Mentoring with your peer mentoring can be just as powerful as mentoring from people who will surely give you advice. Some of us have been through things and experienced things, and we can share your advice. But I would also suggest that networking with your peers is equally as important, because when it comes to both getting a job, keeping a job, and progressing in an organization, 360 support's really important. And I think whenever I was being considered for an opportunity or a job, what was most impactful to me, if I have to be completely honest with myself, was that I had peer support and I had garnered followership at all levels. And I think that was really critical, because the hiring leaders know. People know about, I always joke about an interview question I ask people sometimes is, what's written about you on the bathroom walls, right? Like, just what is the self-awareness of what people think about you? And I always think it is important that people recognize, like, what is the story around you? What's the buzz that you create? And I think sometimes we focus, particularly early in career, at getting in front of hiring leaders and more senior individuals, and we forget the peer relationships. And I think in networking with your peers, learning from your peers can be just as important. And so my advice would be deliberate about your networking and mentorship, but don't minimize the investments that you make in creating some of those strong peer relationships. And also ensure that mentoring and networking includes a diverse group of people who aren't the same. You will naturally, we as human beings naturally, connect with people maybe with like backgrounds, our friendships, our families. we've already got those relationships. So if you're going to be deliberate about networking and mentoring, try to venture to meet people who aren't like you, are going to provide you with a different vantage point, who maybe come from a different, ethnicity or socioeconomic background or educational background, and can provide, a different vantage point than what we would have as our own lived experience.
That is such a rich message, and if I actually could give you research to support that
Oh,
approach to being helpful to a career.
it works. It really does.
Yeah, well, there you go. I love that you can provide a testament to that. We're just about time for the interview, so we'll leave it on that note, because it's a wonderful message to leave on. And again, I want to thank you very much for sharing your insights and your story with us. And for those of you who end up in a room with Daniela, you'll have a little bit more opportunity to hear some direct messages. So thank you again,
Thank you.
and it's wonderful to be talking to you.